Come on in. Fill up the seats. Check out the new angles. Doing it a little bit different today. Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Weekly Narrative. I'm your host, Jeremy from the Weekly Narrative. Flying solo again today. As you can see from the title of the stream, still sick. Still sick, so no Delaney. No Delaney today. Consider not even streaming, but you know what? I skipped one last week. I can't skip another one. One is all I'm giving myself. And on top of that, I'm not just coming back. We're also now multi-streaming on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Weekly Narrative. So check that out. I was actually streaming Cyberpunk over the weekend a little bit just for fun to test that out and see how that worked, but worked pretty well. So we'll be doing that from now on. YouTube.com/Weekly Narrative and Twitch.tv/Weekly Narrative. Welcome in, guys. Come on in. We got a lot of fun news to talk about today. I've been sick, just chilling, reading, seeing a lot of stuff, thinking, man, I can't wait to talk about this. And hopefully some of this will be news to you guys too. So let's go ahead and jump right into the topics today. We're going to talk about Pete Buttigieg getting picked for the transportation secretary. What's that all about? I didn't know Pete Buttigieg was an expert on transportation. Seattle, you guys remember we talked last week about Los Angeles and what they were doing with their new laws, the new attorney general of the LA County, what he was doing, making prostitution and all kinds of other fun stuff legal. We got some updates related to that from Seattle. We're going to talk about San Francisco. We're going all up and down the West Coast today. San Francisco's renaming a bunch of their schools because Abraham Lincoln, guess what? Abraham Lincoln is actually racist, and he didn't do enough to prove that he didn't hate black people. We're going to talk a little bit more about teachers' unions and why I think that they are probably the number one target in the country for if you want to really go full in on like a Civil War type situation. Teachers' unions probably should be your first target. Not for physical attacking, for philosophical and political attacks, okay? Just make that clear. We're going to talk about Andrew Cuomo giving allegations of sexual harassment. What does that mean, sexual harassment? We'll talk about that. And anything else that happens to pop up. Sean King and a lot of leftists are now realizing that the incoming administration is not as progressive as they'd like. They're starting to have what appears to be second thoughts or a little apprehension about some of the picks that's going to be going in the cabinet. No surprise for us because we all knew what was coming, but it's entertaining to see their surprise. We'll take a look at a few tweets from those guys. And MasterCard, some very critical, important news from MasterCard about being able to change your name on the front of your card in case you're part of the LGBTQ community and you want to go by a different name. So, let's jump right into it. What's up, Stalking Horse? See you in the chat. I got a multi-stream chat interface now that I'm trying to get used to. So I may not see you guys' messages right away. Yeah, I got a friend who's telling me stories about his nephew getting a lot of interesting information in school, and he's young, and he goes to school here in California. So jumping right into it, first topic. Joe Biden picks Pete Buttigieg to be transportation secretary from CNN, the most reliable outlet there is. There's really not much to say about this, but it does raise some questions because before we heard it was Pete Buttigieg for Transportation Secretary. Who were they talking about? You guys remember who they were talking about for this spot? From Chicago. What's up, MA? Welcome to the chat. It was Rahm Emanuel. Do you guys remember that? And he also didn't know anything about transportation. So seeing who they were talking about getting this position kind of makes you wonder, is the Transportation Secretary really do anything? Or is it just kind of a gimme for one of your buddies for payback? You know what I mean? Like Joe Biden's got a long list of favors he's got to repay to people. So he's got to fill some of those slots that aren't as important, like the Transportation Secretary. CNN says Joe Biden will nominate Pete Buttigieg to be his Transportation Secretary. The president-elect said in a statement on Tuesday, elevating the former South Bend, Indiana mayor and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate to a top post in the federal government. Buttigieg will be the first Senate-confirmed LGBTQ cabinet. Oh, that's right. Secretary, should his nomination make it through the chamber. Quote, Mayor Pete Buttigieg is a patriot and a problem solver who speaks to the best of us, who we are as a nation. I'm nominating him for Secretary of Transportation because this position stands at the nexus of so many interlocking challenges and opportunities ahead of us. Not because I'm nominating him for his long track record of excellent transportation management in wherever he was, because he's a LGBTQ. I forgot about that. I actually forgot that the whole point of this, probably aside from the whole favor thing that I was talking about, where you just got to repay people and, you know, bring in some guys that you want to raise up who are on your team. He kind of ceded control during the nomination process to, you know, the establishment guys. So this is kind of the nod back to him, right? But LGBTQ, he doesn't know anything about transportation, but he's LGBTQ, so that definitely means he's qualified in Biden's America. Biden's America, a term that I'm going to be using a lot. I can't wait to use Biden's America. Anytime something goes wrong, Amazon guy delivers my package to the mailroom instead of my door. Biden's America. Biden's America. Everything that goes wrong is Biden's America. Did he ride the South Shore Railroad in South Bend? Well, so the joke that I was going to say was that it makes sense that they pegged Pete Buttigieg for this position because his ass has seen a lot of traffic. I didn't think that was appropriate though, so I didn't use the joke. Some people don't like that very much. The leftists, they don't like that guys who clearly don't fit the position are getting these positions. So here's Sean King, aka Talcum X, the white guy who pretends he's black to advocate for black people and make money off their sorrow and suffering, says, retweeting the confirmation of Pete Buttigieg, because apparently actual expertise in transportation means nothing at all. That's right. So now we get to watch as the swamp kind of fills back up, right? The swamp's going to fill back up. They pulled out all the tanker trucks. The hoses are hooked up. They're slapping them down in the pond. And the swamp is going to fill up. And Sean King, Talcum X, is not happy about it. Talcum X also retweeted an interesting tweet, kind of trending in the same direction that I was talking about, where these leftists are not going to like what they're going to see with the Biden administration. He retweets from probably some small account, but he says, to date, there's not a single person who supported Bernie's presidential campaign who has been nominated or appointed by Biden to any office at any level. None. Not one. But please keep going on about the importance of unity in the Big Tent Democratic Party. So, what's up, Commander Osis? Welcome to the chat. He says, here's the thing, though. No one is going to properly report on Joe Biden. That's true. I'm about to go full accelerationist. Well, see, now you understand why I wasn't too upset that Trump didn't fully make it in this one, or he had it stolen from him, whatever you want to say, right? I wasn't that upset because now we get to watch this. We get to watch them fight each other. We all get to now sit on the sidelines for a little bit and kind of chill and just watch the magic happen, because they have what, 4 years? Let's say Trump runs again in 2024, or a real contender comes in 2024. That means we have 4 years to sit and watch these guys bite each other's heads off as they accomplish absolutely nothing. They're not going to do anything major. Biden's not going to do shit, okay, in his 4 years. He's probably going to croak after he gets the vaccine, and then Kamala's in, and then, she ain't going to do anything either. Mitch McConnell's going to shut everything down. Nothing's going to happen, and they're going to sit here and do this all day long. They're going to complain and cry with each other. And I, for one, am looking forward to that. So I don't know if you'd call that accelerationist, but I don't mind taking the sidelines for 4 years, because let's be honest, that's all we're doing, okay? We're taking the sidelines. We're not giving up. We're not letting them take control over everything. We're taking the sidelines. Now, there's plenty to be said about the election integrity. We had a bad round of an election, very bad. It's probably always been corrupt, but now we have the opportunity to re-examine that and the process behind it, which I think is the takeaway from this entire situation. The takeaway isn't that we lost control. Watch these people destroy themselves now, which is what they're going to do, because they're emotional. They were always going to eat themselves. If you couldn't tell that from the first time we all saw that Jordan Peterson video with the dude dressed up as a chick with the earrings and he was yelling at him and stuff, if you couldn't tell from that second going forward that they were going to blow themselves up in the end, you were missing something major. And now we're getting to that point. Who will rip on Biden more, the right or the left? Exactly. That is the question that we'll find out. So, all these leftist streamers who, catastrophize about everything that Trump does, all the CNN panelists, all these people who they have a main line directly into their veins of that Trump hatred. What are they going to talk about? All that anger that they're conditioned to have, that hatred, that vitriol, the snaky behavior that they use to try and attack each other by setting up traps. The most recent trap, actually, if you didn't see, is the new PhD thing, or the Dr. Jill Biden. So the trap is, if you don't call her doctor, then you're a misogynist. So, see, they're going to be laying and dropping traps like that on themselves now instead of on the right. So it's going to be great. Just sit back, relax, watch it happen, study it, take notes. Biden will give amnesty to illegals, says MA. Well, it's not a good thing to accelerate. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to go full on with the illegal immigration or not. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Because the left has an angle there too. The left. So once the left is in power, now that Biden's come into power, they have to, all the lies that were telling themselves to attack Trump, they have to flip the rationale. So now they may actually, if they choose to, they can choose to use this tool if they want to. They can choose to use reality. It's very interesting. They have a very interesting relationship with reality. They can choose to use it as a weapon or not. And now that the left is coming in, they may recognize reality and say that, well, black communities are disenfranchised and they lose jobs, their lower class jobs, by having illegal immigration come in. They could start to use those, not maybe that's specifically that example, but things like that against Biden. Now that, again, it depends on whoever the enemy they're facing, they'll choose different angles from reality to attack. They're very good at their attack methodologies in that manner. But I'm just saying, don't be surprised if you start to see leftists coming out against some of this kind of stuff. We'll find some magical, mysterious reason why all of a sudden illegal immigration isn't as great as we always once thought it was. We must create right-wing media, stalking horses. That's a great idea, actually. I was thinking about that right as I was coming on live, because I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but I was waiting until the end of Tim Pool's stream before I came on, because I don't want to, not that I'm stepping on his toes, I don't care, but a lot of the people that would watch me are probably watching him first. So I don't want to have to compete. And what we should do, or what somebody could do, maybe I could end up doing this myself, is basically streaming Tim Pool's stream and a bunch of other content creators who all have similar ideologies, or a variety, whatever. The point is you're curating content on a single channel, and then you just watch the one channel. I don't have to go over to Tim Pool's stream. I don't have to go over to this guy's stream over here or whatever, Steve Bannon, just hypothetically throwing names out there for people who have shows. It's all in one place, and then as the curator, I curate the channel, but then I also come on for a segment for an hour or 2 hours to do my show. See, yeah, Stalking Horse says I was watching Tim Pool. See, that's what I'm saying. So I'm already thinking about this kind of stuff. There's a lot of opportunity out there to start a conservative media, but it's not really a conservative media. It's just a guerrilla media, a new media. Commander Osis says, does it really matter? We have sanctuary states that they anchor baby to all the time. When Prop 187 in California was overturned by an activist judge, that was the death of California. Well, see, California is getting to the tipping point. Elon Musk is leaving California. He's one of the last big manufacturers. I think Oracle just mentioned that they were leaving California. A lot of the big tech has already announced they're moving to Texas. We don't see the immediate effects of that yet, right now, but we will soon. And the people who lead everything are going to start to realize that as well. So all these things, it's getting to a critical mass. We're approaching critical mass in California anyway, I think. What I'm trying to say is it's going to get so bad that they're going to have to start turning this thing around. And you got to remember that all this stuff that's happening, the illegal immigration, all that, taxes, regulations, ridiculous laws, legalizing prostitution, being drunk in public in LA, stuff like that, it's all cyclical. It's all cyclical. It's gonna come back around in the end. It's just a matter of time. Stalking Horse says, as long as you don't have your show on during Beauty and the Beta. Well, I'll have to look up their time slots. See? It's another show that you could have on the network. I know you guys are fans of that. I've never watched it. I've heard a lot of people mention that, though. Let's continue on to our next story. We talked last week about LA Attorney General legalizing things like prostitution, drinking in public, resisting arrest. No longer illegal in LA. And that was by order. If you don't believe me, it sounds ridiculous. I know. Google Special Directive 20-07. It's all right here. We went over it last week. It didn't get that much coverage in the media, but it is as bad as it sounds it is. I mean, some of these have small stipulations to them, like, you have to prove that you have mental illness to get away with it. But in general, we're talking about legalizing crime. A lot of things that used to be misdemeanors. Let us now, on that note, take a little trip over to Seattle. From KOMO News in Seattle. Seattle City Council molds law that could result in dismissal of many misdemeanor crimes. This is from the end of October. The Seattle City Council is considering new legislation that would create a legal loophole that would make substance addiction, mental illness, or poverty a valid legal defense for nearly all misdemeanor crimes committed in the city. Does that sound familiar? Because all the stipulations that were in the Attorney General's Directive 2007 were all stipulated on having a substance abuse problem or being mentally ill. If you meet either of those two conditions, then you were able to get away with pretty much anything you want in the city, and if you can prove it. The council's consideration of the plan has occurred with virtually no public discussion about the proposal, which has been included in the municipal budgeting process. The council has not so far conducted a standalone meeting to discuss this idea. The legislation was proposed by City Councilwoman Lisa Herbold. The proposal would allow for dismissal of crimes of poverty. Crimes of poverty. And it would do so by revising the definition of duress as a defense against prosecution. Seattle police currently make about 12,000 arrests every year that are not DUI offenses or related to domestic violence. In 2019, charges were filed for just over 5,400 misdemeanor cases, not including DUI charges or domestic abuse allegations. If approved, the ordinance would excuse and dismiss, essentially legalizing almost all misdemeanor crimes committed in Seattle by offenders who could show either symptoms of addiction without being required to provide a medical diagnosis. Well, there you go. My question was, what is the burden of proof? What do you have to do to prove this? And apparently there's not even a medical diagnosis required, so you could just claim symptoms of a mental disorder or poverty, and the crime was committed to meet an immediate and basic need. For example, if the defendant argued they stole merchandise to sell for cash in order to purchase food, clothes, or was trying to scrape together enough money for rent, the accused could not be convicted. Isn't that interesting? So we move, jumping forward a little bit to December 12th. We got another article here from Outkick. They've since modified their language around this, their strategy. So they're not just, legalizing crime. It's now called the poverty defense. So the article talked about if you can say that you're in poverty, then this kind of stuff is going to be okay. So essentially what's going to happen is you can steal. I could walk into, electronics store and steal a TV, walk out and say, well, I couldn't make rent this week, so. Delaney, I'm doing solo because I'm still sick. And I think she might still be sick too. MA, yeah. So solo again today. From Outkick.com. Seattle City Council discussing poverty defense for stealing. The City Council is discussing a proposal to permit poverty defense that could effectively exonerate someone who steals if the crime was committed to supply a basic need. If this passes, it would be an affirmative defense. If somebody shoplifts fruit from the store so their family could eat, or steals, say, a TV from Target and resells it in order to pay for rent. Isn't that interesting? As we see, the story in and of itself is interesting, but when you zoom out a little bit and look at the big picture, it gets even a little more interesting. Because we've had this seemingly assault on the middle class. We talked about the wealth transfer, that is the COVID lockdowns last week, how all this wealth is being transferred from small companies, small businesses, individual people, up to large corporations. As small businesses get shut down, small families can't pay for their rent because they can't open their businesses, and now they're in poverty. And now, suddenly, they're allowed to steal TVs. It's almost like they're trying to accelerate the decline themselves. Like, that everything around you is indicating that more people are going to be in poverty. You're almost encouraging it. You're forcing people into it to some degree by forcing everything to be closed. And now you're saying it's okay to steal stuff from businesses who have to stay open to feed themselves. Isn't that an interesting kind of like, snake eating its own tail type situation where it's just going to self-replicate into infinity? Yeah, these cities are all going to end up like Detroit. Exactly. Yeah, and OSIS says, this is what I'm talking about, accelerationism. The inmates are running the asylum. Defund the police, that's another angle. Good point. I'm glad you brought that up because that's another angle on the whole big picture that I left out. Encourage crime, make it legal, take away everyone's ability to earn income, and defund the police. If you were trying to make an escape from New York type situation, those would be the first four things you would do. You would remove everyone's ability to generate income, get rid of the law, and get rid of the law enforcement. So then you ask yourself why all these large companies are leaving Seattle. I think Microsoft just recently released a lease on like a 90,000 square foot office in Seattle. No surprise there. Concluding in the article, it says, I don't honestly know what the right answer is, but in my opinion, an Andrew Yang style universal basic income would be a much better solution than announcing to the world that there are no consequences for crime. Look at that. Even in their solution is more government. So when, even the people who say this is a little too much, they say, well, I think a better idea would just be to make us all reliant on the government by default, so we don't have to worry about having our own source of income or being able to live on our own. You can't have a society where people can steal from the shop owners and homeowners with impunity. Oh, somebody has a little bit of sense over there. But if it's going to go the same way as LA's going and the rest of the West Coast, they're going to make it a thing. Speaking of West Coast, San Francisco, this is another fun story. San Francisco is going to rename a ton of its schools. Why? Well, because they were named after white people, essentially. Spoiler alert. But this one in particular, San Francisco, to rename Abraham Lincoln High School because former president did not demonstrate that black lives mattered to him. As woke renaming committee also takes aim at Democrat leader Dianne Feinstein and Teddy Roosevelt. San Francisco Unified School District's renaming committee decided Abraham Lincoln High School will be renamed. 44 of the 125 schools in the San Francisco Unified School District are to be renamed. 44 of the 125. So this is what they're doing with your money. You give them money, and then they form a committee. The teachers' unions or whoever it is, they decide that it's a good use of resources to get a committee of people together because, I could spend my time teaching the children, researching new techniques in this changing day and age for teaching kids over remote. I could spend my money a lot of different ways, but I could also spend my money making a committee for people to look at the names of the schools and see if there's any problems there. Because the last thing that we want is for someone to unknowingly be walking around with the name Washington on their shirt or Lincoln. I mean, if a black kid has to go to a school that says Lincoln on it every day, clearly they're going to have PTSD by the time they get out, right? Jeremy, why do you think this cultural Marxism is happening? To me, it's impossible for it to be a natural phenomenon. Oh, good question. Good question, M.A. Actually, I would disagree with you 100%. I think cultural Marxism is a 100% natural phenomenon. And stuff like this, they're trying to rename schools for absolutely no good reason, just because they're named after white people. This is an inevitable result of having society where you have losers and winners. The people who do all this kind of stuff, everyone on the left, essentially, it's almost a requirement to be on the left, is you're a loser. In some manner, some respect in life. You're the prey. Okay, there's always a predator-prey relationship. It's very natural. Every biological ecosystem is dependent on this balance. The losers, what they do is they realize, well, this is what, they hate success. They can't succeed themselves. They realize they can't succeed. So what they do is they attack everybody else. They tear everything else down, and they look to authority to do everything for them. Just like I try to use a schoolyard analogy because nothing in life and human interaction is any more complicated than something you would see at a schoolyard. Okay, so the kid that gets picked on, what does he do? He goes and cries and complains to the nearest authority. The guy who's monitoring recess, the teachers, the principal, whatever. The losers always are going to look to the closest form of authority to go to try and make change happen on their behalf because they can't make the change happen themselves. Now we have a situation here where these losers who've gone through school, they got picked on, they adopted leftism in college, they left college, they come back, they get a job as a teacher, and then they get a committee position, which is probably exactly what happened here. Now they are having input into the system, and they are the authority, or they're exercising whatever authority they have over whatever sphere of control that they have to implement policies for losers. Losers policies. Marxism is just another code. It's a code word for losers. These people are all absolute losers, and you can't get rid of it. That's why people always talk about, oh, we got to fight back. We got to take over this institution, or take this back, or fight over this, or whatever it is. It's not, you can't get rid of it. There's always going to be losers. Why do you think they're always crying about equality? Because, again, they can't reach success themselves. They need the authority, government, to smash everything else down to their level so they can feel equal. There's no way to equalize everybody up. You got to smash everybody down. That's why the Marxism was always all about equality, and socialism is tied into it, because the only way for them to achieve what they think is success is to destroy everyone else's success. I could elaborate on that point. That could be a whole episode, but good question. Anyway, let's continue on. Let's learn a little bit more about why Abraham Lincoln is being renamed here. From the Daily Mail, a San Francisco district is planning to rename a school named after Abraham Lincoln because the former president did not demonstrate that Black lives mattered to him. I don't know how else you would demonstrate it. By freeing the slaves? I think it's pretty clear indication. The president, who is often held up as an American hero for abolishing slavery, is just one of 44 historical figures soon to have their names scratched off schools within the San Francisco Unified School District. Other names include George Washington, Herbert Hoover, and Senator Dianne Feinstein, whose name will be stripped from the Dianne Feinstein Elementary School for allowing the Confederate flag to fly outside City Hall back in 1984 when she was mayor. So she made one little mistake back in 1984, and the Marxists, the mutants, the losers, determined that she didn't apologize sufficiently enough for that. So now, 40 years later, we want to take her name off of whatever school she's on. The renaming of the schools comes as part of a nationwide reckoning around racial justice that has seen Confederate flags banned, military bases renamed, and statues toppled of racist Confederate figures across America in the wake of the police killing of George Floyd. So, let's, the rationale, you might be wondering why, but why though? The district's renaming committee decided Lincoln is not worthy of keeping his name on Abraham Lincoln High School because the majority of his policies proved to be detrimental to Native Americans. And there you go. There you have it. Do you recognize what's happening here? Do you recognize this phenomenon? This is, I wouldn't even call it a persuasion tactic. It's almost like a rhetorical tactic. I talked about it on my stream a couple weeks ago. This is the fallacy of perfection in action right here. See, because freeing the slaves, you would think that's enough to get you some street cred with the black people, right? That seems like a pretty good thing, but Lincoln wasn't perfect. Nope. He did free the slaves. He abolished slavery, but some of his policies were detrimental to Native Americans. So we can always find, doesn't matter how good you are on the outside, what your intentions are, we can always find something to attack you on. Always. I mean, Dianne Feinstein, she's a leftist. They attack her because she flew a Confederate flag once 40 years ago on a flagpole. You can always find something to attack. It doesn't matter. Under his watch, indigenous peoples has much of their land taken away from them. And then they talk about the Homestead Act and how, the long walk and all that kind of stuff. Other reasons for the president's ousting include, quote, rampant corruption in the Indian office. The precursor of the Bureau of Indian Affairs continued unabated throughout Lincoln's terms and well beyond where government-appointed Indian agents stole resources meant for tribes. So they're taking the Native American angle. This is the guy who started this, by the way, Jeremiah Jeffries, a Nation of Islam member, who's also a first grade teacher. This is the guy who's teaching your kids in the school district, by the way. So I wasn't joking earlier when I said that these teachers come in with an agenda. They don't want to teach your kids, okay? If you think they want to teach your kids, you need to take a second look at things. They don't want to teach your kids. They want to make their ideology. They want to reproduce their ideology. Let's see. Let's learn a little bit about Jeffries here. He held boycotts to encourage families to send their children to protest a closure of a school. Hit headlines nationwide when he held a protest against teachers spending their own money on school supplies. It's a power broker, the District Board of Education, using its influence to get people elected. Sounds about right. I mean, teachers, they don't want to teach the kids. He grew up at the age of in Philadelphia with 7 children. I'm trying to understand where this guy's coming from. At the age of 12, his sister was shot dead. Jeffries had his first taste of working in education as a janitor. He went to the University of Virginia, where he got involved in... here we go. Here we go, folks. He went to the University of Virginia, where he first got involved in racial justice activism with the Black Student Alliance. Because that's what you do in school. Including getting first black woman in the student office. When he moved to San Francisco, he co-founded Teachers for Change and later Teachers for Social Justice Activism, alongside Mark Sanchez, who's also on the renaming committee. Did I not call it almost to the T, 100%? They go to college, they get indoctrinated, they go out into the world, and then they try to reproduce their indoctrination. So when you send your kids to these schools, keep that in mind, okay? When your kid's like 9 and he's learning about transgenderism and being homosexual in place of algebra, and he's learning about how Lincoln is a racist, just keep that in mind in the back of your head. That's what they're talking about. There's a reason why, even now with all these Zoom calls and stuff, they don't want parents observing the classes. But it gets even better. And the reason why I say they're specifically targeting only white people in this, and why I'm going to call them on their BS, is because they slipped up. They slipped up on Cesar Chavez. They not renaming Cesar Chavez School. And the authors of the article call this out as well. They say labor leader Cesar Chavez can keep his name on Cesar Chavez Elementary despite his derogatory comments about undocumented immigrants. This guy, by today's standards, this guy hated illegal immigrants. Absolutely hated him. He was founded the National Farm Workers Association in 1962, which merged with the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee to become the United Farm Workers. The union helped improve working conditions and pay for Latino farm workers in California, Texas, Florida, and Arizona. But he also encouraged members of his union to join what he called, quote, wet lines. Wet lines. Do you know what that means? Wet lines? To stop undocumented immigrants crossing the border from Mexico to Arizona. Wet lines is a racial slur for a lot of people, especially on the left, that should be on par with the N-word. Wet lines, referring to wetbacks. Okay? He hated, by today's standard, but they're not removing his name from the school. Why? Well, my first clue is that he's not white. So I have to question the motives of the people who are renaming these schools. Is it really because, they did one or two things bad? I mean, Dianne Feinstein let a flag on a pole once. Abraham Lincoln freed slaves, but some of his policies were detrimental to Native Americans. This guy over here said form wet lines, but he's fine. No. If a white guy said form wet lines, do you think they would rename the school? Is forming wet lines, and they actually did form the wet lines, and they They went out, just like, remember when the white guys went out to the border when there was all the border stuff was going on, and they formed like the patrols, like the militia patrols? That's exactly what this guy was doing. But he keeps his name because he's presumably because he's not white. It's the only clue that I have. Wet is back. Stalking Horse says wet is back. I mean, apparently it's cool. Apparently you can call people wet. According to the leftists, you can call people wets and get away with it. Totally fine. If I said it and they had a school renamed after me, I would not get my name removed from the school. The Native American thing is just an excuse. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's because, like I said, the fallacy of perfection. They can always find something. Nobody's perfect, especially when you consider how low IQ is it to compare people who lived hundreds of years ago to today's moral standards. That is the most low IQ stuff not the most like low IQ thing I can think of, but that is so ignorant of history. These are the same people that run around calling themselves educated. I'm educated. They probably have degrees in history too, and yet they think it's okay to judge people of the past by today's moral standards. That's so low energy, low IQ stuff. And these are the people that want to educate your children. Keep that in mind. What's up, Joe Perez? Joe Perez says, Hispanic or Mexican lives don't matter. Only black lives because it can be used politically. That's a good point. Yeah, we're not talking about black people with Cesar Chavez. That's an interesting point too. I'll be willing to accept that over my rationale that he's not white. I'll just, in good faith, I'll put that reason above the not white thing. Yes, MA brings up also a good point. He says, I think Lincoln was a race realist. They also quoted that in here. Lincoln said that he doesn't think that blacks and whites can live peacefully together because they have physical differences, basically, is what he said. So, yeah, no, you're right. That he would be considered a race realist by today's standards, which is also another interesting term, race realist. It's a very propagandistic way to just say science. I'm a climate realist. Apply that terminology to any other thing in life. I'm a health realist, which means I love vaccines that are made in warp speed. Give it to me now. I'm a health realist. I love vaccines. If white people had a collective identity, they would not be able to do these kinds of things to our statues and school names. It's true, but white people have been too complacent over the years. They've gotten too soft as this stuff's just been going on. These parents see their kids going to school and getting taught about anal sex at 8 years old, and they're just like, well, it's an interesting curriculum, I guess. They don't. And then their kid gets pumped through the system, goes into college, gets a stupid degree, gets in a bunch of debt, gets indoctrinated along the way, and turns out to be one of these guys. They don't intervene in the process at any step of the way. So I don't feel sorry for them at all. We don't deserve to not have this happening because we weren't collectively paying enough attention or taking enough action on it anyway. So I say, you know what? I'm a proponent of getting exactly what you deserve, and this is what we deserve. They don't go after Cesar Chavez because the Hispanic population would have blowback. That's also another factor. That's true. White people are tricked into being atomized individuals who don't react collectively. Yes, that's true. White people, that's the atomization of our communities is probably the main factor why we are so unsuccessful politically, culturally. I would peg that as the number one factor. Brazil by far had the most slaves in the Americas. All right, look, Stalking Horse, we don't want to talk about any slavery realism, okay? Or about how like the Irish were basically slaves in America as well. There's the slaves were sold to America by black people. I mean, we were just the customers. We didn't throw the nets. We were just the customers, okay? To the markets that were already existing. We don't want to talk about the Middle East slave trade. We don't want to talk about slaves in China or anywhere else. Okay, just leave all that. It's not conducive to this productive conversation. Africans were sold by Arab merchants. Joe, get out of here with your slavery realism, okay? No reality is allowed. No reality. Or again, the selective twisting of reality to fit whatever needs that are at hand. Speaking of racism, yeah, race and IQ is very taboo. Well, look what happened to Stefan Molyneux. He was the guy who wouldn't shut up about it. Now he got blown off the internet. Speaking of that very topic, going back to Portland, as we make our road trip up and down the West Coast today. Portland, I don't know if you guys have noticed or not, but there's been some riots, a couple riots here and there, some protests. Occasional light protests here and there. And back in November, towards the end of November, the protests damaged some buildings around a guy's barbecue shop. Okay, and I thought this story was interesting because the owner of this barbecue shop is a black man. But they don't really talk about that. The store was lit on fire, and it was lit on fire again, and we didn't know why until we found footage of this black man giving an interview. Let's look at local news coverage from the Seattle local news here about the first time and the second time this
today,
happened.
Portland firefighters responded to a fire at Rio's Ribs on Sandy Boulevard.
Rio's
overnight.
Ribs.
In the video, you can see smoke pouring out of the roof of the restaurant. The Hollywood District restaurant was destroyed in another fire in 2017, and it reopened after they rebuilt. That fire was determined to be accidental, but the owner, Rio Venardo, said he did not believe that at the time. There's no word on what started this.
The owner didn't believe that it was accidental. Interesting. So we fast forward to this story.
A fire set at a popular restaurant, Rio's Ribs, in Northeast Portland in the Hollywood District.
Who's that?
The new video shows why investigators now say it was arson. Watch closely here. You can see a person coming through that gate, lighting newspapers on fire, then actually setting the building on fire. So police are on the lookout for that arsonist. This happened back on November 23rd. The same weekend, several Hollywood District businesses were vandalized during a protest. Detectives have not yet said if this fire is connected to vandalism. Owner Rio Venardo rebuilt the restaurant after another fire back in 2017, and he believed that fire was arson way back then. Detectives believe.
Interesting. So what you don't know is that this guy, the Rio's owner, he gave an interview, and he didn't speak very highly of the Antifa and of the vandalism that was happening in the area. Let's see what he had and see if we can't connect the dots here.
This morning's fire. In the video, you can see smoke pouring out of the roof of the restaurant. The Hollywood
That's
District.
not the interview. Let's see if I can find the interview here. Here we go. All these videos autoplay, so I have to reload the page.
As city leaders speak out tonight against widespread
Here's
vandalism.
the owner of Rio's Ribs.
It up now also.
Not
At
this guy.
Rio's Ribs, the owner's brother, Ricky Venardo, says he first noticed the damage when he came into work.
It's kind of scary, and I feel a lot of people work hard for to keep their business going.
Notice
And
anything
then
about
to
this
have
guy?
it damaged during this time of year with the COVID epidemic going on, I mean, it makes it even worse.
Although Rio's was not targeted, he's still troubled by the situation.
I hope whoever's doing this, that they would catch the people that's doing it, and they be prosecuted for what they've done. I mean, because it's really a sad time of the year that they're doing this.
They should arrest them.
That's it. They should arrest them. This is a sad time of the year. that was enough. Now, did you notice anything about the person? Look at the footage
Leave
again
that
of the
for-
person who's setting the fire. Let
Not on
me know if
camera.
you notice anything here about this person here. Some of the footage they didn't blur out as well, so you get some clues. So the first clue is that I see dreadlocks. I don't think they look homeless. I did see some dreadlocks in there, so that would definitely indicate a conservative. Dreadlocks, and the owner was black, so I think this is a clear-cut case of racism right here. I mean, the owner was black, and they burned his business down because he talked bad about the Antifa people. Clear-cut case of conservative racism against blacks, right? What's up, Josiah? Josiah says, your microaggression is triggering me, and I need a safe space for me to transition into a genderless, fluid humanoid. You're going to love the next story we have, Josiah, because I have a credit card just for you. You're going to love it. But isn't this fun? And if the reason why, the irony that I wanted to point out with this story is that clearly it wasn't a conservative person burning down a black person's business. And based on the immediate evidence in the area, he said that the Antifa people should be arrested. The Antifas were burning down, smashing windows and blowing everything up in the area. If there was a 1% chance that this was like a conservative or a Proud Boy or anything like that burned down this black guy's business, this would be national news. Probably. Maybe for a day. No, I'm not saying it'd be national news for like a week. It wouldn't be a George Floyd style story, but it'd be on CNN. But now, when you call for the arrest of leftists, the mutants, call for the quelling of the mutants, and you happen to own a business, guess what? It might just get burned down again. And the owner said that he thought he was targeted the first time too. So I just wanted to point this out. This is the kind of great stuff that you can expect if you want to come and visit one of the glorious cities on the West Coast. What I'm going to do is make a tourism compilation video that we can market San Francisco and LA and Portland and, put all this great stuff in there. Say, hey, everyone else is leaving, but you know what? That just means there's a lot of open real estate for you to come and start your business. Down here in Portland, up here in Seattle, San Francisco. And you know what? While you're doing it, why don't you open up a card with MasterCard to start your business? Because you're in a progressive city now, and you need a progressive card for your progressive city. Introducing by MasterCard, true name, trademark. A feature that lets transgender and non-binary people display their chosen name on their card. Because here at MasterCard, we support LGBTQIA+ communities and are committed to equal treatment, equal opportunities, and equal rights. We stand alongside organizations like GLAAD, National Urban League, and others to foster initiatives and programs that continue the tremendous efforts that all LGBTQIA+ trailblazers, past and present, have made, and we continue to learn from them. So, you know what? Come on down to Portland, open up a business. If you're a minority, we'll just give you a bunch of money for free anyway, and then you get to put whatever name you want on your card. Those videos will be memory hold. Yes, all joking aside, yeah, the videos, all evidence, any of that kind of stuff, it's very, you notice now, when you see stuff like that, and you notice the dogs that aren't barking, you should start to realize that the news is essentially just kind of like a very selective picker game, where the claw goes around and it searches for a specific story, for the perfect time, the perfect content, the perfect subject matter that's gonna, make the right people angry against the right people. We don't talk about stuff as it happens. There's no just, hey, this happened. It's, the picker goes over the story of the barbecue place. It's like, oh, a black-owned business got burned down. Wait a second. Okay, this could be good. The hand starts going down, and then the footage comes out that it's like a dreadlock chick, and that the guy spoke bad about Antifa, and the claw just goes right back up. It's like, whoa, hold up, oh, nope. No, that is not the story we were trying to tell. We were assuming that this was like the Proud Boys just burning down barbecue joints for no reason other than the owner was black. That story would get spread like wildfire on Twitter. Fast track to stardom. What's up, Dari? Welcome to the chat. Jeremy, your history realism is triggering me. I need a safe space. Well, you know what? Just get a MasterCard. Put Louis on there if you feel like you identify as a man, and it'll make you feel better. It even comes in a rainbow colors, because we want to make sure that mega corporations are addressing the needs of the 0.01%, which are the transgenders, because there's hardly any of them. But this is a huge social issue for us. They don't hardly exist, but you would think by these campaigns that they're 50% of the population. But we all know the reason why I bring up the MasterCard story, not because it's retarded, but not because I have a MasterCard and I'm going to put a stupid name on it, which I am going to do, not because of that, but because it's so ironic. And it needs to be pointed out, even though we all know the left is immune to irony, that all these mega corporations are using capitalism, using these mutants, the LGBTs and the Antifas and the socialists and all the commies. They're using the mutants in a capitalistic manner to generate profit for themselves. I love it. Frankly, I think it's amazing. I say MasterCard, 2 thumbs up. Keep doing it. I want a Black Lives Matter card. I want every kind of retarded card you can think of. Because I love seeing these leftists tacitly embrace capitalism as they tweet on their iPhones and say they hate capitalism, and then get their MasterCards that don't have the real name on it. I know MasterCard is shut down right-wing accounts. I know. I don't actually like MasterCard, but I love what they're doing with this. It's hilarious. They're making profit off the leftists. I think that's hilarious. You guys got to learn how to reframe this stuff and see the good. Okay, MasterCard, yeah, evil mega corporation, all that, bad. Shutting down people's accounts for political reasons, yeah, bad, I know. But you got to take a laugh when you can get it. This is hilarious. The Claw and Pizza Planet. I don't know what you're talking about there. The media will still talk about the white Antifa critically sometimes. What they will never do is talk about actual black violence at an alarmingly disproportionate scale. Only when it's convenient. Again, you can find footage of Don Lemon talking about black violence and the exact reasons for it, and how there's no fathers in the homes. If you just rewind a few years, okay? Keep in mind, they'll use the tools at hand to fit the needs of the minute, okay? If you want to lie about it one day because it's politically expedient, you told the truth a long time ago because it was politically expedient in a different way, it doesn't matter, okay? These people don't, there's no objectivity in their world. So you're right, you know, they're not going to talk about it now, but they will eventually. They will eventually. Joe is going to tax people making over $400K annually. I laugh when I hear that. Had a guy counter my raising taxes argument. Yeah, well, again, he can raise taxes on the rich, and guess what the rich are going to do? They're going to respond to incentives, because that's how economies work, and they're going to leave. They're going to leave the country, which I think is actually what should happen. We should raise taxes and make all the productive people leave, and leave all these mutants with no tax money. Or otherwise remove yourself from the tax system. Go become like an Amish cult in the woods or something. LGBT people are going to have their identity stolen at a high rate from having nicknames on their credit cards. Well, that's the price you pay. You know what? When I go in and I buy my coffee for $6, at least the barista sees the right name, but you know what? Could have my identity stolen. First there was ribbons, razors, now LGBTQ credit cards. Yes, it doesn't ever stop. I don't think it will ever stop. Until a natural fluctuation occurs where it's going to cycle back eventually. Did you guys know that Governor Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo from New York had sexual assault allegation against him? Did you know that? Because they probably aren't talking about it in the news. Interestingly enough, another case of selective coverage. Remember, the Claw. This is another story that I don't really care. I'm not covering this again. You guys know me. I'm not covering this to tell you that Andrew Cuomo was sexually harassing people. We're talking about the more interesting undertones of the story. So let's jump into this. From Vox, another reputable source. Sexual assault allegations against Governor Andrew Cuomo explained. And it's Vox, so we know we're getting the truth, 100%. By Anna North. Vox, for those who don't know, very leftist outlet. They'll take any opportunity they can to promote, Me Too and all that kind of stuff. So they're on board, but now they're conflicted because they have to report against a leftist. Yes, Governor Cuomo sexually harassed me for years. Many saw it and watched. Quote from Lindsey Boylan on Twitter. Candidate for Manhattan Borough President and former advisor to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo in a tweet thread Sunday morning. All right, so immediately right off the bat, any red flags? Anyone notice any red flags? The first two sentences. Lindsey Boylan, a candidate for Manhattan Borough President and former advisor to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, said in a tweet Sunday morning. So she was a former advisor, but now she's coming out with allegations as she has a candidate position. Interesting. So the red flag for me is that I'm getting an instant vibe of I just want attention because she's running for a position. She's a candidate for Manhattan Borough President, and now she's like, well, I need some publicity, so I was sexually assaulted. Let's just go with that. Rigo Vasquez, so glad you're doing okay. Proving the 99.9%. Hey, never been happier to be part of the 99.99%, buddy. Thank you. Vox is the worst. That's why we're here. Continuing on from Vox, Boylan, who appears to have worked for the governor's office from 2015 to 2018, provided few specifics. Another red flag. Two red flags in like 3 sentences in the thread, and stated that she has no interest in talking to journalists. 3 red flags. 3 red flags. But she did say, I could never anticipate what to expect. Would I be grilled on my work, which was very good, or harassed about my looks? Or would it be both in the same conversation? 4 red flags. 4 red flags. She doesn't say what actually happened. So we got all the makings of a classic Me Too here. But I don't think it's going to work because of the target. Target in question is on the side of the Me Tooers. And there's no specific allegations here. So what I'm guessing happened is that Cuomo said she looked nice or something like that. And then she took that as sexual assault, right? Continuing on from Vox, the governor's office has denied the allegation. Quote, there is simply no truth to these claims. Caitlin Gerard, the governor's press secretary, said in an email to Vox on Monday. The report comes at a time of intense scrutiny for Cuomo as he manages rising coronavirus infections and the vaccine rollout in his state. The governor has been amongst the most visible figures in the pandemic, blah, blah, blah. And he wrote a book making a bunch of money as people died in his state. So, see, normally, and this is a demonstration of principles. I know people on the left are not familiar, but the principle is where you stand on an objective stance or statement, regardless of whether it's good for you or bad for you. In this case, I could have chosen to just say, oh, look at Cuomo. He had a sexual assault allegation. Me too. Hashtag me too. I could have went on Twitter and just been like, oh, me too, Cuomo. And, said Cuomo's a rapist or whatever it is that they say these days. Cuomo molested me at a party in college. But too many red flags. And we've seen so many of this Me Too stuff fall through in the past. Just as absolute lies or attention grabs, mostly attention grabs, that I have to even stand up for Andrew Cuomo on this one. She gives no details. She's running for a candidate position. She's a candidate for an office. It happened way in the past, several years ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago. She gave no specifics. She doesn't want to talk to the press. She tweeted about it, but she doesn't want to talk to the press. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and call that an attention grab. So this is the reality that we've all got to face now. Okay, we've created a world that incentivizes coming out with allegations. So you can come out and say, this guy sexually harassed me, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to give any details. I don't want to talk to journalists. I'm not going to tell you what he said. Oh, and I'm also running for this position, so attention, please. That's okay now. Okay, we've created an environment where that's okay. That's normal. It doesn't matter if it actually happened or not. Vox is going to cover it. Vox is going to write a nice long article on it. But again, also an example, callback to exactly what we talked about at the beginning of the stream, where the left is going to eat themselves. So this is a case where I say, you know what, Cuomo is probably innocent of that. He probably said she looked, she had nice hair or nice makeup or something like that a couple times. It's not like she was getting raped or anything. And then she says sexual assault. I say, I don't care. I'm going to sit back and watch, because Cuomo was one of the guys who was advocating for this stuff in the past. And now guess what? You got to deal with it. You helped create this environment. Now you get to deal with it, buddy. That's the moral of this story. That's why I think that was a fun one. That was a fun one. There's going to be a lot like this. Get used to stories like this. Okay, guys? We're going to start seeing a lot of this kind of stuff in the next few years as the boogeyman, the orange man bad, is no longer in a position to get all the attention. Everything Atlas Gaming and more says, the total count of deaths in California from COVID is 0.00006% of the population of Cali. One of the things I've noticed is that, the numbers seem to be kind of low in the Sacramento area since the start. Surprisingly low for, populated areas. There's no real way to track non-citizens without a social security number. You're a global citizen, Commander Osis. Okay? We don't need a social security number anymore. That's outdated. You're going to get a chip, and you're going to get a travel card that says you're vaccinated. That's all you need. Why would you want a social security number? Cuomo doesn't care. He's going to go out to eat with medical professionals. Oh, MA, you didn't hear about that? Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. The news isn't going to cover this kind of stuff because they're covering for their boy. You know what I mean? He's on the left. They're covering for him. They're not covering it because it's not credible. Even though there's absolutely zero credibility. If you were to objectively rate that story on a credibility scale, it'd be 0. That's not why they're not covering it. They're not covering it because the target is a Democrat. Commander Osa says he's not really getting eaten, though. They're sling mud, but there's no consequences. It's true. Yeah, no, you're right. It's not. No one's going to go down. It's just a mud fight. It's still fun to watch. Biden will pardon his son and keep whatever money he got out of the deal. Maybe, yeah. The mainstream media will go broke during the Biden administration. Yep, that's what we talked about. Talked about that several times over the past few weeks. The mainstream media is going to have to do some really wacky stuff if they want to try and stay in business. over the next few years, because what are they going to talk about? People are conditioned to respond to outrage. That's what gets the clicks. That's what gets the traffic. And we got to make some outrage somewhere. So, media never discusses Antifa. They only attack Proud Boys instead. Yeah, like the stabbing that happened in D.C. It was the Proud Boys that stabbed people, but then it turns out that maybe that wasn't the case. But anytime something happens, it automatically gets reported as the Proud Boys doing it, and then we find out later that, you know, the Antifa instigated, they started something, or they were the ones that were doing it. So once the Proud Boys and Trump go away, that's when things are going to get interesting. Or incredibly boring. I don't know. We'll find out. That's all I had for you guys today. Let me look through my topics. Yep, that was pretty much it. I had another tweet that I was going to show you about schools, teachers' unions. But we'll talk about them playing more in the future and how they are basically the devil. And they're responsible for everything wrong with America today. But yeah, other than that, I at least wanted to get back on and talk to you guys because it's been a little while. I am live on Twitch. I will be live on Twitch from now forward, so you can also watch me on there if you prefer that interface. I will probably actually be doing some gaming streams on there coming up soon, just to fill some time and hang out with you guys a little bit more. So I'll send out some notifications on that on YouTube if I do. Twitch.tv/weeklynarrative. But I'm starting to lose my voice, so I'm going to call it. Probably be back on Saturday for a show for you guys. Thanks for hanging out. And I'll talk to you next time. Jeremy from the Weekly Narrative. Follow me, like, subscribe, do the parlor stuff down there if you want. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for stopping by.